Oh, hey there. If I'm being honest, this whole YouTuber thing isn't actually that hard. The most difficult part is actually adjusting my blinds so you can't look out the window and tell where I live. Alright, so welcome to a new week. Today, I'm not actually going to teach you anything new. Instead, I'm going to go over a couple of things from last week, just some kind of things that I noticed that you guys were struggling with. Then I'm going to explain the assignment that I want you to do and give you some examples so you know exactly what I want. It's going to be kind of a project. You're going to be using Flipgrid, so I hope that's something that you guys are at least still familiar with and find easy to use. By the way, we have a new wardrobe theme for this week. This week's theme is hoodies from high school. I'm going to be wearing hoodies that for some reason I still have from my high school days. Now, last week you guys voted on what you wanted my wardrobe theme to be. That will be the wardrobe theme next week. So last week was high fashion. This week is hoodies from high school. And then next week will be the one that you guys voted for. And then after that, you guys will have the choice from there on out. All right, what's up, folks? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually do the grid that I assigned you last week. And what I want you guys to do is I want you guys to pay attention to how I do this in order to kind of prepare you for the project that I have you doing later this week. Now, what you're doing here is I give you various pieces of information about an isotope or an atom. So like here, I tell you that this is carbon, and it has a mass number of 12, and it has a charge of -4. So based on that, you should be able to figure out how to know the number of electrons, number of neutrons, and number of protons. So let's start with the top row here. And of course, I have my periodic table right here in front of me. There's one on Google Classroom that you can use. You can either just use it digitally or print it off for yourself if you have a printer at home. But let's start with carbon. So let's start with the easiest one. So carbon, how can we figure out how many protons it has? And the answer to that is we can look up carbon's atomic number. Remember, the atomic number is the number that's at the top of those boxes on the periodic table, and that atomic number tells us the number of protons. So when we look at carbon, we see that it has 6 protons. Okay? It has 6 protons, pretty straightforward. Now, how can we find the number of neutrons? Well, that's where the mass number comes in handy. If you'll recall, I taught you that the mass number is the number of protons and neutrons put together. So here's kind of the word problem for you. The word problem is if you have a total of 6 protons and neutrons, if you have a total of 12 protons and neutrons, and you know that you have 6 protons, well, how many neutrons does that leave you? And 12 minus 6 is also 6. So in this case, there is 6 protons and 6 neutrons. Now all we have left is the number of electrons. Now here, in order to figure that out, we look at the charge. So if the charge is -4, that means that there are 4 more electrons than there are protons. Does that make sense? Because electrons have a negative charge, protons have a positive charge. So if the charge is -4, that means that electrons outnumber protons by 4. So what is 6 plus 4? Well, in this case, it's got to be 10. Okay, so there's 6 protons, 6 neutrons, 10 electrons to give it a charge of -4. Let's start with boron. Boron, this time it gives us the number of protons and neutrons. So let's find the mass number. The mass number, remember, is just protons and neutrons put together. So therefore, it will be 11 for the mass number. The isotope, this isotope should be called boron 11. Because it's got 11 protons and neutrons. Okay. Now electrons. Now let's look at this here. Let's compare the number of electrons and protons. when we see that there's 5 electrons and 5 protons, protons have a positive charge, electrons have a negative charge, and so we see that those two numbers are equal, which means that our charge is 0. Okay, sorry, that's kind of a funky 0, but you guys get the point. That protons and electrons perfectly balance each other out, so this is a neutral atom. There is no charge. All right, down here, we see that we don't know the name of the element, but we do know its mass number and its number of protons. So let's start with the easiest one first. If this atom has 19 protons, what must its identity be? Well, if we look on our periodic table and we look at number 19, we see that that is potassium. And the letter for potassium is K. All right, so that is potassium because it has 19 protons. Now, if its mass number is 40 and its number of protons is 19, that means whatever is left over must be neutrons. Okay, so 40 minus 19 is going to equal 21. Okay, 21. So there's 21 neutrons and 19 protons. That should equal 40. Now, if potassium has a charge of positive 1, how many electrons must it have? And so in order to answer this, we're going to have to look at the number of protons. There's 19 protons, so that has a positive 19 charge. How many electrons would it take to give it overall a positive 1 charge? And the answer to that is that there must be 18 electrons. And hopefully you can follow. Hopefully you can follow my logic here. My logic here is that if it has a positive 1 charge, that means there must be one more proton than there is electron, right? Protons must outnumber electrons by 1, therefore the charge is plus 1. Now let's do oxygen. Okay, so oxygen has a mass number of 20 and a charge of -2. So this one's kind of tricky, but I think we can do it. So let's look at the number of protons. That's probably the easiest one to figure out. Let's look at the atomic number for oxygen. And when we look on the periodic table, the atomic number for oxygen is 8. Okay, the atomic number is 8. So if there are 20 total protons and neutrons, but 8 of them are protons, how many neutrons do we need to add up to 20? And the answer is 12. So this atom must have 8 protons and 12 neutrons in its nucleus. Now, if oxygen has a charge of -2, what must its number of electrons be? Well, if it's a negative charge, that means that since electrons are negative, there are 2 more electrons than there are protons. And we know that there's 8 protons, which means that the number of electrons must be 10, because 10 is 2 more than 8. Last one. So bromine. Now this one is kind of tricky too, because it's going to be easiest if you find the number of protons first. I know this blank is first, but you need to find the number of protons first. So let's look at bromine, that's Br. When we look at bromine on the periodic table, it has an atomic number of 35. Okay, it has an atomic number of 35, which means it has 35 protons. Now, it should be easy now to figure out its mass number, because its mass number is just going to be 35 plus 30, which we know is 65. Some of you might have put down something like 79 or something like that. The mass number is not the same thing as the atomic weight. Okay? In order to get the mass number, you need to add up the number of protons plus the number of neutrons. So, if there are 35 protons and 36 electrons, what must the charge be? So what you can notice here is that there is 1 more electron than there is protons. Electrons are negatively charged, and so that means that there is a -1 charge to this atom. Okay, so hopefully you're starting to figure things out here, and this should help you for the assignment that I'm going to explain to you briefly. All right, so I'm going to take you through the instructions for this isotopes and ions project. You can find this document that I'm about to show you, and you can see it on your screen. You can find this document on Google Classroom under classwork. So just kind of a summary of what you'll be doing. You're going to use household items to make a model of an atom with the correct number of protons, neutrons, and electrons. And then you're going to film your model and answer some questions using Flipgrid, which hopefully you're pretty familiar with that and you've used it before. So you're going to create a model of a boron 13 atom with a positive 3 charge. That is the atom you're going to create. You must use anything you can find around the house to represent protons, neutrons, and electrons. Now, I want you to film the model that you made, and I want you to explain it to me on the Flipgrid. And so you can answer these questions while you're doing the Flipgrid. How many protons are there? How did you figure this out? How did you know how many protons to put? How many neutrons are there? How did you figure that out? How many electrons are there? How did you figure this out? What is the mass number of this atom? And if you were to add one more neutron to this atom, would it still be a boron atom? Why or why not? So if you want an example of me doing one of my own, you can click this link, or you can just keep watching this video. I'm going to attach it to the end here. So stay tuned. What you're going to see next is my example of the Flipgrid. Hey guys, this is an example Flipgrid that I'm making for you so you kind of know what you need to do. Now, bear in mind here, I'm going to make my own isotope and ion out of stuff I found around the house, but I'm doing a different isotope and ion than what I assigned to you, so you can't cheat off of me or anything like that. So here is my atom. I decided to make a lithium-7 isotope, and that lithium-7 atom has a positive 1 charge. Okay, so here's my atom. It's got a nucleus in the middle here, and for protons, I used these blue clips. And then for neutrons, I used these pennies. And then for electrons, I used the batteries. Now, I knew that there had to be 3 protons because the atomic number of lithium is 3, so I put 3 protons. But I know that if this is the mass number, 7, the rest, which would be 4, would need to be neutrons. So 1, 2, 3, 4 neutrons, those are the pennies. So I know that 3 plus 4 equals 7. That's why I put 4 neutrons. And then for the charge, if it has a positive 1 charge, that means that it has to have 1 more proton than it has electrons. So that means that if there's 3 protons, there must be 2 electrons. Then that's why I have 2 electrons. So the mass number, the number of protons plus neutrons, is 7. And the charge is positive 1. And hypothetical question, if I were to add 1 more neutron to it, what would that do to the atom? Well, it would not change the identity of the atom. It will still be a lithium atom, but now instead of being a lithium-7 atom, it's a lithium-8. Thanks for watching. Remember, we have Zoom Q&A sessions on Tuesday and Thursday from 11 to 11:30 a.m. if you have any questions. I'll also encourage you to reach out to me if you want any one-on-one help. We can arrange a Zoom meeting or something like that during my office hours. Once again, my office hours are every day from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Don't be afraid to reach out to me. I'm here to help. See ya.